Alright, hello everybody. Today I read an article on PC Gamer titled How I Turned RuneScape's Dumbest Meme into a Troll Card for its CCG competitive card game. And basically, in summary, this article was about taking that initial concept and turning that into your finished product, which is a card that is fun to play, interesting to use, not annoying, potentially, and ultimately keeping all of the flavor of what it is you set out to make. So, for example, Gnome Child from RuneScape. How do you put that in Chronicle and keep and maintain the flavor of what it is and why it was interesting from RuneScape to begin with, but also do all of the other things that I've just mentioned, you know, keeping it playable, making it interesting. How do you combine all of those things? And really interesting article, lots of insight into how Jagex does that, but also other game studios as well. But to summarize, the article starts by talking about how Chronicle is a popular card game, but unlike other popular card games, it does not rely on the lineage of Magic the Gathering very heavily at all. In the sense that, you know, the game does not have mana, you don't play your creatures to then build up a board to fight your opponent's board and eventually smash your opponent in the face and kill them. You don't do that. Well, in Chronicle you do eventually kill your rival, but the game is very much more about always being 4 turns ahead, planning 4 turns ahead all of the time, and building a character, progressing a strategy, and ultimately executing that strategy that you hope will win you the game. It's more about you, building your plan, your agenda, and your character, but ultimately, the game is very different from most other games out there, and as a result of that, there is no template for creating cards, because in Magic and Hearthstone and many other games, you know, if I've played any of those and I'm trying to create a game that is perhaps similar in terms of lineage that I mentioned earlier, then, you know, I know that this 2-drop would be really strong in this situation, but in my game, that might not be the case because we don't have these other interactions that I already know exist in these other games, right? You've got lots of information to base things on, and balancing cards is a lot easier as a result of that. But as Chronicle is so new and different, you don't have that, but also you don't have that creative sort of equivalent. Like, you can't build on ideas that already exist. For example, Harry Potter, Dementors are quite similar to ring wraiths in Lord of the Rings, and Rowling did say that that's what she based them on. And ring wraiths in Lord of the Rings are quite similar to shades from Greek mythology. Now, to put this into a card game context, the mechanic charge in Hearthstone is almost identical to haste. Well, it is identical to haste in Magic the Gathering. Except in Hearthstone, even though the mechanics are identical, they interact differently because, you know, creature combat is different in Hearthstone. Like, you as the player decide exactly what you're going to hit. Whereas in Magic, your opponent says, okay, you're attacking with that creature, I'm going to block with this creature, right? And like, effectively your opponent gets to decide what your creatures are going to hit. So charge is perhaps not as useful in the same way it is in Hearthstone as it is in Magic. You're always building on different things. So you're always building on things that exist before, and that is the case across entire human history with regards to creative works. Chronicle doesn't have that in the same way that other card games do. I mean, like, how many years of Magic are there now? But for Chronicle, there's not that much out there in the world to draw from. So how do you create a card in Chronicle, is the question. And I think the article does a really good job of encapsulating that struggle into a discussion about all of the different iterations they went through. What could Gnome Child be? Oh, I'm not sure about that. How about this idea? And like the progression of that concept to that final product. But for those that don't know, Gnome Child is a thing I think Jagex have been wanting to use for a very, very long time. It is very iconic. It is very well known on the internet, mainly for the dumb, silly memes that often make the top page on Reddit, right? It's instantly recognizable, and I think anything like that is an asset that needs to be put into Chronicle. So how do you put Gnome Child into Chronicle? And really, he's known for those silly one-liners, right? Like those semi-philosophical nonsense that he comes out with, like, not all heroes wear a cape. Sometimes a little inaccuracy can save a ton of explanation, and he says tons of these silly little quotes, and over time, people have just, if you type in Gnome Child quotes, taken anything that sounds semi-philosophical, put a picture of Gnome Child's face next to it, even obviously if he didn't say it, and over time, it has evolved into something that can only be described as the dankest of memes. You can imagine his little face bobbing around with this text dialogue, which he doesn't actually say, but it's evolved into something, and it's here to stay. But how do you take what it is and turn it into something flavorful in Chronicle. Because, like, it's all very well and good having something really cool, like, for example, Cerberus, a boss monster from old school RuneScape, fairly new one, or General Grado, really iconic God Wars boss that anyone who'd ever played RuneScape would pretty much know about, right? Like, it's all very good having that, but then you need to have a cool idea that actually suits them. Like, I know Mod Merchant a while back mentioned they have ARAMs, they want to put ARAMs in the game, they have the card art for it, but, like, you don't want to put it in the game unless you have a good idea that fits and is really cool that people will like, right? I think that was a problem that we learnt when we did put Cerberus, or when they, not me obviously, but when Cerberus and those other old school RuneScape themed cards did go in the game. So what do you do for Gnome Child? And one of the ideas they came up with was, you know, he has quotes, so why don't we add quote cards to your rival's hand that, I don't know, they have to play, right? They can't play any other cards until they've played the quote cards. And then, you know, you get the quote in your hand and it's annoying and it's a bit trolly, which is basically what Gnome Child is. And, you know, that idea is cool, but I think it oversteps the not being annoying boundary, because we used to have a card, well, it's still in the game, Melzar the Mad, but it used to add 3 tainted cabbages to your hand, or to your rival's hand, rather, not their deck, to their hand. And it was so irritating because, well, not only was Yoga Shaman much stronger back then, so the synergy and damage there was huge, but, like, often it would just block 3 draws. Like, you know, draw up to 7 cards in hand, because, you know, you want to draw 3 at the start of the next chapter, and then the 3 slots that you were saving for your draws at the next chapter were just, you know, completely, you didn't get them, because you had cabbages instead, and it was so irritating, because your hand was effectively 3 cards smaller for the entire rest of the game, and that really did, you know, impede your ability to play. And it was just annoying, right? And this would be even more annoying if you had to play those cards as well. So how do you take the quotes and not make it so irritating? And one of the ideas is maybe what you do is, here he is in play sitting on a mushroom. I love that. They say, let's put him on a mushroom because, oh, he's a gnome. Of course he'd be sitting on a magic mushroom. But given all of the philosophical quotes he comes out with, I think they put him on a mushroom for different reasons, but obviously they're not gonna highlight that because it was a professional game studio. But yes. So another idea as a card Gnome Child could be in Chronicle is, well, as you can see, is a 2-cost support here, and maybe his card text, his effect is your rival's next creature or their next card. Generally, you replace the card text with a Gnome Child quote, right? So, for example, this Mischievous Imp, you get rid of the draw 1 card, you put a big line through it, like how you would remove Exhaust from a demon with Abyssal Demon, and it would instead have some ridiculous quote, like, not all heroes wear a cape. And that's really funny. Your opponent's like, oh, Gnome Child, you got me again, in the same way that, like, you might Brugs and Burson a really expensive support and they can no longer pay for it. Instead, they end up paying for it, but they don't get the full effect, like, you know, Vampire Power. They only get the 3 base attack. They don't get that, all of the life increase, or, you know, maybe you hit something like Tokash or Virago, and you feel really great because you managed to hit that card, you predicted where it was, and you got him. But apparently, according to the article, that effect might be too powerful. I don't necessarily think that's true, and I really do like this effect. I think this one is very, very interesting. I think silence as a mechanic is something that could be really cool, either for card text, like they're mentioning here, where you just replace the text with a quote, but also rewards, like removing rewards as well. I think that's something, or even collecting your opponent's rewards. I think these are all ideas that could be explored in Chronicle, and I do kind of like that. Maybe you fight your opponent's next creature, I don't know. But back on the topic of Gnome Child, the final iteration that they did come up with, by the way, here's a time-lapse drawing of Gnome Child by one of the Chronicle artists. Definitely go and watch that. It's on the article. I'll put a URL to it below. But the final card here is a Diamond 2-cost support. He is an ally and reads, replace the effect of a random card in both players' hands with a Gnome Child quote. So what's going on here? What is actually happening? So it's kind of like discarding a card, right? Because your rival, hey, have a card in hand, and you effectively remove what is useful about it by taking away the card text and replacing it with some nonsense. But they end up keeping the card. It stays in their hand, so it's kind of like also giving them something useless, like a tainted cabbage or a cannonball or some bones or something like that, right? So it's kind of like discard and grief, or hand grief, giving them something they don't want in the same card. There's no other card that does that in Chronicle yet, and I really like that for Gnome Child. He's got his quill, he's rewriting all of the cards. But really, is that true? And the answer is no. You're not really causing too much of a problem most of the time, I would say, because half the time, I don't know, you're going to hit Jad, right? That doesn't have any card text anyway. They don't care. They've still got their 15-7 that they're going to kill for 4 armor and a base attack. I don't know. You hit Dagonoff Sentinel. You hit, if you're a new player, Skeleton Warrior. All of these cards, it doesn't matter if you actually hit them with Gnome Child. Nothing is going to happen. And sometimes you might even help them. You might even hit KGP Agent, right? And now they've got a 1/2 creature that rewards a base attack, and it's not going to discard one of their cards. So there is that, right? It's not actually always going to be helpful. Sometimes it will, but I'm just gonna put it out there. Scarface Pete is way better currently, right? Like, it's just discarding 3 is huge, and maybe that's not a very fair comparison because Scarface Pete is currently not very punishing to kill. Maybe the creature does need to be a bit bigger. Hopefully, it will be changed in the next 6 or 7 weeks, if you know what I mean. But Gnome Child, not as good, right? And he costs 2 gold, and the effect is symmetrical. So you're doing it to one of your cards as well. But maybe you can hit your own KGP Agent. Maybe you can build a deck with Mimics in it and a bunch of crappy cards that hurt you or do some damage to you, or the drawback is really big, but you want to remove the drawback, and Gnome Child can do that for you. That's a cool idea. I really like the concept, but just from a competitive standpoint, I think this card is not very strong because it only affects 1 card, right? Like, maybe if it replaced the effect of 2 random cards in both players' hands, or maybe more than that, something like that, right? The deck could be a lot better. But at the moment, costing 2 gold and being symmetrical is no good. I'd like to see it stay symmetrical, but just affect more cards in each player's hand. So, Stephen Mensa, I really like your article, but as a competitive Chronicle player, I don't think the card's that strong. But I can see the merit in the ideas behind it and how we got to this location with the card, how we got to this point with the card. And I think there is definitely something really cool about this that has been thought up. I don't think this particular iteration will make it to print, and if it does, I'll be quite disappointed since it is a diamond card. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about Gnome Child. It's a really interesting topic. Jagex have wanted to put it in for a while, and it raises a bunch of really interesting issues. This article I thought was really good. Definitely check it out. Thanks for watching. Leave a like if you thought it was interesting as well. This video, that is. And I will see you all again next time.